everyone. Welcome to the Nurturing Home Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Shambly, and today we're going to talk about making things homemade and the value of that in nurturing your home. Growing up, I was surrounded by a mother who made a lot of things homemade and lots of other moms in our community that taught me how to make food homemade, certain housewares homemade, just things around the home, anything from candles to soap to dishwashing liquid, important tools to cultivate your home and to care for your home in a very intentional way. When I was around 6 years old, my mom and I joined a girls group that was local to us called Keepers of the Home, where moms and daughters came together, and for a lot of home ec lessons and crafts were taught to these girls. So I remember as a young girl learning how to make soap and how to set a table, how to sort and clean laundry, how to make bread, how to host a dinner party, and the list goes on and on. So one really unique thing is that I grew up in this organization, in this little club, learning so many homemaking crafts from my mother-in-law. She is and was such a great homemaker, and I was in her home a lot growing up. Our families were really close, so very frequently, multiple times a month, I was in her home, seeing her cultivate her home, seeing her cook for her family. And so not only was that something very consistent in my household growing up that my mom modeled for me, but also in my husband's household that he grew up in. So that really did affect, expectations when we got married of like what homemaking would look like and what the role of the wife and the husband in the home would look like. Because we had such similar upbringing, we knew that nurturing and cultivating our home was going to be very high on our priority list. And it was a beautiful thing that we had such similar worldview and expectations. We both knew even before we were married that I would be staying home with my kids, that I would be homeschooling my kids. And of course we hadn't worked out all of the details of like what that would look like, if I would continue working some. And if you're interested in hearing more about my story, choosing to stay at home full-time with my kids, that is what episode 1 of the Nurturing Home podcast is. I was a nurse working in the hospital setting, and I chose for me to quit my job and stay home full-time, which has been a wonderful journey. But all that to say, choosing to nurture the home was something that my husband and I were very passionate about even before we got married, because it was modeled so well by our parents and by our mothers. And making things homemade is one way that we can nurture our home in a very intentional way, because it is the work of our hands. A lot of the recipes that we make, a lot of the things that we make with our hands are works of art. They can be a very intentional way to provide for our family, to thoughtfully think about the needs of our family and how we can meet them with the foods that we make and the things that we do. So for me and for my husband, some of the reasons why we choose to make a lot of our foods homemade is because we know the ingredients, we know what's going into what we're eating. And for my husband and I, like I mentioned in the last podcast, he is a nutritionist. So he went and got his certified nutritionist certification and learned so much about what goes into our bodies and how that affects how we feel, how we function, our energy levels, our sleep patterns. And that was something that was so fascinating to me as well, just going through my own health journey, learning about my hormones and my hormonal imbalances and how I eat and how I live and how those really do affect how I function just as a woman in my 20s. So we really came together and learned and decided to make some decisions for our family when it comes to food, some things that we want to avoid and some things that we really want to prioritize in our diet. So for my kids, for example, we really do not ever have food dyes or refined sugar, corn syrups that I purchase and bring into our home. We are not extremely strict about that when they go to other people's houses or, go to church or events and things like that. Those are exceptions where we allow them to, of course, still have the cupcake and all those things. And I make cupcakes in our home. We just try to find more nourishing, nutrient-dense versions of those without any artificial food dyes and sweeteners and things like that. So another thing that we really prioritize is whole foods. So instead of eating the most processed version of a food, we're going to try to find the most whole food version. And depending on what you're eating, that may be really easy to do or may be difficult to do. So obviously, eating a raw apple is a great way to eat a whole food. But if you're going to make bread, you're going to have to process the wheat to some extent. But it would be great to have, a whole wheat that's maybe been sprouted and that you fermented the dough, whether with sourdough or with another fermentation process. So, and some of the reasons why, of course, we choose to eat a whole food version of the food is because we do believe that it has the most nutrients in it for our bodies. It's easier for our bodies to pull those nutrients from the food, depending on the way that it's been processed. So just prioritizing nutrient-dense foods and whole foods and decreasing a lot of processed synthetic things in our food is important to us. So when we make things homemade, we know what's going in to the food that we're eating. For our kids, we have, younger kids, we have a 6, 4, and 1.5-year-old. So the foods that we're putting into their body, we do think about how is this affecting their development? Is this giving them the nutrients and the fats and the protein that they need for their brains to grow and for their bones to develop? It's not something that you have to obsess over and count macronutrients and things like that. It's not something that I do. But I do like to think about, am I giving them a protein? Am I giving them a carb? Am I giving them a fruit and a vegetable? Are they getting healthy fats in this meal? So things like nuts, cheese, yogurt. We do also do things like, eggs and sausage, and various, forms of meat. But really prioritizing the way that they eat those foods, not just like a Pop-Tart or a Little Debbie, some Kool-Aid, like the traditional foods that we hear about kids growing up in the 90s eating. Those are not the foods that we have in our home. They may have their place for special treats, but those are not things that we eat on a regular basis for sure. And one thing that I want to teach my kids with eating and with making our own foods, we are listening to the way that these foods make our bodies feel. So I notice, that when I eat a frozen biscuit, I feel pretty crappy afterwards. But if I eat a biscuit that I have made from home with, sprouted wheat flour and grass-fed butter, and I eat it with a protein, that carb with the protein, that combo, I feel so much different. So teaching our kids from a young age that we can cultivate our own diet and make our own foods that help our bodies to thrive and function well is an important aspect of, making things homemade. Also, I think about affordability. And for us being a single income family, affordability is important. The foods that we make from scratch a lot of times are a lot easier on our budget when it comes to making things homemade versus buying them. Things like bone broth and bread and yogurt and things like that are so much cheaper to make in your own home. Also, when we're making things for our home, homemade from scratch, I want to teach my children the beauty of this work. When we're creating food and cultivating these beautiful meals and moments with our family, we're really teaching our kids the importance of togetherness and intentionality. When you're working together as a family to make a meal, you're teaching your kids these recipes, these habits, these techniques that have been handed down through generations. And so sweetly for me, a lot of these techniques and recipes come down from both sides of the family for my kids. I have a recipe box filled with recipes from my mother-in-law and from my mom and from my grandmother and aunts that I received all through my childhood that I will be able to give to my daughters. It's so special to me that I get to share that legacy with them. We're passing on this legacy of food and of recipes and of intentionality with our food in the way that we can love our family and nurture our family through food. And there is a beauty and a sacredness in really delighting in the food that the Lord has provided for us, thanking Him for providing this for us again, giving us these nourishing foods to allow our bodies to serve Him, teaching our kids that food is not something to take for granted or to complain about or whine about, but to be thankful for. And I think that is taught so well when you pray over your food. I think that's a pretty common Christian practice, is to thank God for our food. For breakfast, a lot of times that's when I do our Bible time. So we all take turns praying at different points in the meal, depending on the kids and who has, finished their food first. We're all eating in different stages, for breakfast when it's just mom at home with the kids. The baby is usually finished her food by the time I actually sit down to eat mine. But sitting down at the table is such a good time to talk about the Lord and talk about His provision for us and how He is the bread of life, and to bring up some of these analogies that the Bible gives us over and over and over of how God is our nourishment. He does feed us, feed our soul. Christ sustains us and gives us what we need. So there's so much beauty in drawing that parallel to our kids as we make things homemade and as we are slowly preparing things together. And sometimes the slowness of making things homemade causes us to slow down and have moments to talk to our kids about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I wanted to share with you a few of the foods that our family makes homemade and why and how those really benefit our family. So first I wanted to talk about bread. I think I've talked about bread a lot in my YouTube videos and probably on this podcast as well. Bread for me is such a base for so many meals. Each week at the beginning of the week, I like to make a large batch of bread dough. And when I say bread dough, it really just means a yeasted wheat dough that I ferment in a refrigerator for 48 hours. So, using that bread dough as kind of my base, I'll, pull it out and make pizza crusts. I will make cinnamon rolls. I'll make dinner rolls. I'll make sandwich bread, just kind of depending on what meals I have planned that week. This bread is kind of the base for so many meals and for so many different things. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I go through how I make this bread and what that process looks like and how I use it to make pizza and bread and cinnamon rolls and different things like that. So check that out for sure. It's youtube.com/nurturinghome. So another thing I make from scratch is broth. Bone broth and chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth, all those things. It is so great to be able to pack so much nutrients into those broths. You can buy, whole chicken, you can buy beef bones, you can use vegetable scraps. I love getting a huge stock pot going in the morning and let it cook all day long. Sometimes overnight, kind of depending on your schedule and, how long you're going to be home and what you're doing too, if it's going to be a vegetable broth versus a beef broth or a bone broth. A bone broth, you're going to be having it bubble away for several hours, sometimes through 2 days, making sure that you're pulling as much nutrients and marrow out of those bones. But some of the flavors I love adding into my bone broth are lots of onions, garlic, celery, carrots, whole peppercorns, Celtic sea salt, ginger, various herbs. You could put some thyme in there, some rosemary, whatever flavors you really like and whatever you're going to be using the broth for. I love adding apple cider vinegar and coconut oil also to my broth. It really helps round out the flavor and the fats, but also helps the coconut oil and the vinegar helps pull nutrients from the bones that you're using. So there's so many great tools that you can use to make your bone broth really, really nutrient dense for your family to add to your soups and to your pasta sauces. I like to boil my rice and my kids' pasta in this bone broth, or any type of broth that I make, because I know it adds just another layer of nutrients to their meal. So I make all of our breakfast foods homemade. So anything from, quiches to muffins, biscuits, scones, granola, any type of foods that we eat for breakfast are homemade in the home. And I think that breakfast is an important meal. I think a lot of times we grew up hearing people doing sugary cereals and Pop-Tarts and donuts and all of these like really carb heavy breakfasts that don't set up our body for energy throughout the rest of the day. And so for me and my family, I've noticed that when we eat a fiber and protein rich breakfast, that really gives us what we need to thrive for the rest of the day, to have the energy that we need for the rest of the day. Especially with homeschooling, we have our main school block right after breakfast. So if I have piped my kids full of sugary cereal right before we go into school, I usually have kids who are jumping off the walls for the first little bit, and then who are just completely dead. They've had a huge sugar crash, and now they're grumpy and they have no interest in school. So for breakfast, a lot of times, we do yogurt, eggs, and then a hearty, muffin or breakfast bread. I like to do oats, nuts, and flaxseed meal. Like those are like my main three things that I like to put in pretty much anything that I make for breakfast, because I feel like that combo is so good for us with fiber and iron and fats and protein. With my muffins, I've also shared those recipes on my YouTube channel if you'd like to check those out. I think it's great to add as many eggs as we can to our muffins to get as much protein in there. I usually do low sugar, and if I add sugar, and it's usually like coconut sugar or raw sugar, something that isn't just an empty form of glucose, but that has other nutrients and minerals in there, to add as much nutrient density into our food as we can. So those morning muffins are great with an egg, maybe with some sausage or some bacon on the side. I am a big fan of chicken and turkey sausage and bacon. We have done pork, off and on in our family, and that's just another thing of like choosing to listen to your body and how your body feels. My husband and I have kind of gone through a few different diet philosophies, trying like high amounts of animal products in our diet versus like very few animal products in our diet. And we have just found that what works best for us is not eating a lot of red meat. And that's just because the way that it makes our bodies feel. So we do try to eat high protein with every meal to balance our blood sugar, so that we're not having these big sugar highs and crashes. But we're also eating a lot of plant products. We're eating a lot of plant heavy foods. So not only eating all animal product. And that might change. That might change in a little while once we listen to our bodies a little bit more and cultivate that a little bit more, and work that out. But right now we are eating animal products with every meal, but not necessarily eating meat with every meal, if that makes sense. So we're doing like eggs and dairy and nuts and beans and other forms, whole food forms of protein. I love garbanzo beans. That's one of my favorite things to do in soups instead of meat, is to do garbanzo beans. Even in like salads, like quinoa salads and bean salads. That's a great option. I love chicken. We do lots of chicken, but it's great to listen to your body and to listen to what it needs and what it tells you. If you feel yucky or you have gut issues after eating a certain food, try to find out whether or not it's that food by itself or a combo, or if you're eating a processed version of that food. You just have to kind of work out what's best for your family and for your bodies. So some other things that I make homemade are pasta sauces, like my spaghetti sauce, like my red tomato-based spaghetti sauce, and then like Alfredo sauce. Those are really yummy. Pestos, I've made those too. Our family really does love like a tomato red sauce just for like our pizza, for spaghetti. I have kind of been going back and forth between like a chickpea based pasta lately. I really love those pastas. They're really yummy because it has a lot of protein, and you're decreasing your carbs. I like carbs. I have carbs with every single meal, but if you're eating spaghetti with bread, that's a lot of carbs from your pasta and from your bread. So sometimes I do chickpea pasta to have a little bit more protein and have my carbs from the bread. That makes sense. I haven't done a video on my spaghetti sauce yet. I hopefully will get that out soon, that y'all get to see how I make that. But I have a spaghetti sauce recipe that my family loves that has chickpeas instead of ground beef. It's an excellent source of fiber, and it is high in protein and really delicious. The texture is not, it doesn't bother me or my family at all. I love serving it on spaghetti squash as well. So like I said, I go kind of back and forth between chickpea pasta and spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash is very sweet tasting, so it kind of just depends on how I'm feeling. If I want like a tomato based pasta sauce, I usually like that with spaghetti squash. I like that sweet flavor with the tomato. But if I'm going to do something like an Alfredo sauce, then I really like it with a more traditional tasting pasta. Alfredo sauce is something that my mom grew up buying a lot of the time. We didn't eat Alfredo like just a whole lot growing up, but when we did, most of the time it was from a jar. And my mom was very thoughtful about what she put in our bodies. She was very much, in the 90s, she was like eating organic and buying organic foods and a lot of plant-based stuff, very much into like grass-fed dairy and things like that before people even knew what that was. Like, she has this story of going to the grocery store in maybe like 2000 and like asking where the organic apples are, and the grocer was like, I don't know what that means. What is that? So she was the OG when it comes to natural and organic eating. She was very intentional about what she put in our bodies. So if she did buy Alfredo sauce in a jar, it was probably like the cleanest one that she could possibly find. We went to the health food store in the town where we live all the time growing up, and I remember her buying me, like dye-free candy and stuff from there growing up. So thanks, Mom, for teaching me all of that growing up and the importance of knowing what is in your food and reading ingredient lists and all that good stuff. All that to say, now as a mom and a maker of my home, I still love Alfredo sauce, but I love making it. I've just recently started doing that, in the past 2 years, and I've really loved making that for our family. Just like a simple bechamel sauce, which you can make, any way that you want. And you can make it from really great ingredients. I love making my Alfredo sauce with my bone broth, so I'm adding in all those delicious flavors and nutrients, and then adding in some chicken, sometimes some broccoli. I love broccoli in the Alfredo, so it's like chicken and broccoli Alfredo with Parmesan cheese. Oh, so delicious. On my chickpea pasta with a salad, like maybe like a spinach salad on the side. So delicious. All of our our salad dressings, that's a pretty easy thing to make from home. But salad dressing is one of those areas where you can find some nasty ingredients creeping in, just with the type of oils that they use in salad dressings. I really like staying away from refined oils. You can find so many studies on how refined oils are inflammatory for our bodies, for our guts. They affect our immunity. So I would definitely research and look into refined oils and how those can be harmful for your health if you haven't already. So I always stay away from canola oil, hydrogenated oils, and just try to focus on the least processed version, like virgin coconut oil and avocado oil and olive oil. Those are the three that I use. And then like butter and ghee, those are like my main fat sources when it comes to adding things in, like with salad dressing. So my favorite salad dressing recipe that I make for almost everything is so simple. It is whatever oil you like. I use avocado oil or olive oil most of the time. Equal parts oil, balsamic vinegar and maple syrup with some salt and pepper. It's so easy and it's so delicious. I've also done like rice wine vinegar instead of the balsamic vinegar, and that was great. I've also done apple cider vinegar instead of balsamic vinegar. So really any vinegar. So it's just like oil, vinegar, and maple syrup equal parts. And that is so delicious on like a spinach salad. I'm really craving the spinach salad now that I'm saying it. I do like spinach, walnuts or pecans, sometimes both. Onions, whatever vegetables really I have, carrots, bell pepper, apple. Apple's a big part. Cheese. I love doing like a organic raw cheddar, white cheddar cheese. So yummy. Bunch of spinach, and then my dressing. Oh, it's so good. That balsamic with the apple and the cheese and the nuts and the walnuts. Oh, so good. That's like my go-to salad. So if anyone listening has ever come to my house for dinner, I probably served that salad because it's just my favorite. I have made yogurt a few times and have enjoyed it. It's kind of hit or miss with my kids whether or not they're going to just sit down and eat a bowl of yogurt. I love adding it into smoothies. So in the past when I've made homemade yogurt, I used it mostly in smoothies. Smoothies are a great way, I'm sure you know, to pack in lots and lots and lots of nutrients for your kids. It's a great way to get them to eat their greens. You can add some extra fats in there like coconut oil or a nut butter. The list goes on and on. You could put in like a protein powder or something like that if you wanted to really beef it up. But just like some frozen fruit, some yogurt, some greens, some raw honey. It's just a delicious snack, a delicious addition to a meal. I also make homemade popsicles for my kids, especially in the summer. They love just the experience, of like playing outside, eating a popsicle. Sometimes we'll like get our little small kiddie swimming pool out and they'll play in the swimming pool and eat their popsicles. So I just bought like an inexpensive popsicle mold, and a lot of times I just pour my smoothies that I make, if there's leftover smoothie in the blender after I've poured everyone their smoothie, I just use that to make popsicles for my kids, and it has all of those really great nutrients and vitamins in it for the kids. So I could just keep going on and on and on about things that I make from home. Just going to hit a few more highlights. Granola. I love granola. My kids love granola. It does pair well with yogurt. It makes for a great snack. I do a couple different versions. I do like a baked granola, like a traditional granola, where you like roast it in the oven with, nuts, and you can put raisins or chocolate chips or whatever you want in there. But then I also do like a raw granola bar or ball. People have all kind of different names that they call these things, but a peanut butter granola ball is pretty much what I like to call it, where you just do like a large amount of nut butter. I like peanut butter. I love finding ones that don't have any added oil, so it's just peanuts and salt. And then raw honey with some flaxseed meal, vanilla, Celtic sea salt, and then I add in my just like raw sprouted oats, any additional like nuts or seeds or anything that I want to add. And then I'll usually do like a dark chocolate chip in there and roll it up in a ball, and my kids love to eat them. We love to have them at our tea times in the afternoon. I make all of the food that my babies eat. My babies, we don't do traditional, rice cereal, oatmeal cereal, baby food, all the little like teether cakes, all the little things that they make for babies. Those have a lot of hidden nasty ingredients. And baby food, there's lots of studies that have shown that traditional baby food is not the best for their oral development, for their gag reflex development. So I've done baby-led weaning with my last two babies. With my first baby, he was the guinea pig, and I didn't know. I was learning. I did the traditional like cereal and purees and all that stuff starting at 4 months, way too early. And he really struggled with his gag reflex. Babies around 4 to 6 months have that natural reflex to push their food to the front of their mouth and to mash it up and then swallow it. So when we give them all purees, they're not doing that. They're just swallowing it. So it really hinders them in developing their gag reflex. Didn't mean to get off on all of that. But whatever my babies are eating, are things that I'm making. They're eating, smoothies, portions of whatever I'm making for the rest of the family. Or sometimes I will make things, specifically for the baby. I love doing whole milk yogurt and a nut butter, and then maybe like a fruit or a little bit of maple syrup. That's great for babies. Hummus is a great thing for babies. With baby led weaning, of course, they were holding their own food, feeding themselves. I do pickled foods a lot. Of course, just my pickles that I've shared on my YouTube channel. Those are so quick and easy. And something that my daughter, literally every day is can I have a pickle? She loves to eat, the homemade pickles. She loves to help mommy make them. She loves to help fill the jar. She is a feature, I would say, in my YouTube channel too, of my little helper. In most of my videos, you can see her helping me stir, pour in things. She is such a good homemaker already, even though she's only 4. I've done homemade jellies and jams. Creamer, I do my own coffee creamer. A lot of times it is just a little bit of cream and coconut sugar in my coffee, but I like making coffee syrups and homemade creamers, just kind of depending on the season and the mood. This fall I did a pumpkin spice syrup to go in my coffee. It was so delicious. You can check out that recipe on my YouTube channel as well. And then drinks. For our family, we don't buy sodas or prepackaged drinks at all. Sometimes we do some lemonades and things like that. But those are the ones that don't have, added sugars or food dyes or anything like that. Most of the time, all the drinks that we have are homemade. We make, hot chocolate homemade, or coffee, or tea, different juice combinations or smoothies, things like that. Those are things that we drink. Lots of water, of course. I do adrenal cocktails as well. If you've never researched what an adrenal cocktail is, it's really interesting, really fascinating. It is a certain blend of nutrients, minerals, and of course some carbs from the orange juice to really support your adrenal glands to lower cortisol. So if you're having a really stressed out day, this is a great time to bring in your adrenal cocktail. And you can use different types of fruit juice. You just want to have something that's got some carbs, that's got some good vitamin C, some minerals. I like to use Celtic sea salt, some electrolytes. So I do equal parts orange juice and coconut water or coconut milk, and then a healthy sprinkling of Celtic sea salt. I'll have to put a link in the show notes to some more information, more details about an adrenal cocktail. But that's another thing that I love making homemade and love adding into my day. So to kind of wrap up today, making things homemade has so much value. Choosing the slower way of making food sometimes might seem tedious, but there's so much value in that, in knowing what you're putting in your body, knowing that you're supporting your family's bodies to function well, knowing that you are being responsible as you make budgeting decisions for your family's food budget, and passing on the beauty of working with your hands and making things for your home to your children, handing down that legacy of food and of meals and of the practice of serving your family through food. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you'll join me next time for another episode from Nurturing Home, and that you'll check out my YouTube channel, Nurturing Home, and my Instagram, which is nurturing_home_. Thanks.